Americana. What is Americana? Well, it's imagery and iconography that encapsulates the national spirit and identity of the people of the United States. And while as a European, that conjures up a certain image.
Thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com.
Fireball! Get some! Obama! Soda!
Sodies.
It's equally as interesting to see what Americans see as Americana. And could you think of a better place to look than the movie that's literally the first listed on the Wikipedia page? In 1957, The Music Man, written by Meredith Willson, hit Broadway. The story of conman with a heart of gold, Harold Hill, seducing an entire town, but only falling for one girl. That story, taking place during the period that forged the very idea of what it was to be American, the Gilded Age, the gay 90s,
You're all sick!
Oh, be nice!
or simply the period where cowboys hung up their hats and World War I was still a twinkle in a Serb twink's eye, was inspired by Wilson's own childhood growing up in Iowa in the early 1900s and playing in the band of John Philip Sousa during his 20s. The play's original production won 5 Tonys, outcompeted even West Side Story Bruh for Best Musical that following year, and completed its original run's 1,375th performance at the Broadway Theatre in early 1961, being followed by a movie adaptation that next year. And what do you know, it's already off to a good start, being directed by the director of the stage production and starring its lead man, Robert Preston, who actually wasn't the first choice for the movie, but whose experience with the material and that special something he brought to the role prevailed in the end. The story starts on a train filled with old-timey conmen who are sick of Preston's current alias, Harold Hill.
Ever meet a fella by the name of Hill?
Hill!
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 Hill?
Hill! No!
I can already see myself slipping up and accidentally calling him Hank Hill, who has been doing such a good job at being a conman that wherever they've been to, people are sick of conmen in general. Imagine that. When they muse that their next stop, River City, Iowa, is completely out of the question, and even people like Hill would have no chance at conning anyone there, Harold Hill reveals himself and takes their words as a challenge.
I don't believe it caught your name.
I don't believe I dropped it.
And see, that's the face of a man who just conned an entire room of con men. Immediately he's confronted by the town, who communicates to him very clearly, in song even, that they are just happy the way they are, thank you very much.
And we're so by God stubborn we can stand touching noses for a week at a time and never see eye to eye.
Charming. Making his way around town, Preston comes across his old friend, retired conman Buddy Hackett, best known for getting bukakied by the love bug, who directs him to our second key character, Marion Peru. Smart, kind-hearted, but equally as stubborn town librarian. Because even in the 60s version of the 1900s, it's okay to be into nerdy girls. But business before pleasure, and Hill's current business is forming school marching bands, i.e. making them overpay for uniforms and instruments, and making them believe it's a quick way to preserve the moral sanctity of their youngins.
That game with the 15 numbered balls is a devil's tool. Oh, yes, we got trouble, trouble, trouble.
Beyond setting up the town's MO broadly, making them a fun adversary for Hill as a whole, The Music Man spends its first half setting up the town's residents pretty well also. Everyone has their little gags that make them memorable. The mayor, his wife, his daughter, and her to-be boyfriend, the local clique of middle-aged women. Everyone seems to have their favorite. Mine's the school board.
About 1,000 kisses shy.
Played by the Buffalo Bills, named after another icon of the Main Street USA time, who were prominent members of the Spepsquisar, or
Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America.
they are part of the cast that returns from the stage production, and I'm happy to see that they made it to the screen.
Without a sweetheart to my name.
It's cute how you can tell that these people clearly like each other, but have to pretend that they don't, until Hill just introduces them to barbershop singing, and they instantly become the biggest musically talented group of friends in like a second.
Sincere, where is the good in goodbye and good?
And speaking of singing on the screen, all of the musical numbers are not recorded live, meaning that the actors had to mouth along to the music, which again shows why getting Robert Preston and his experience with the material was absolutely necessary.
And River City's gonna have her boys band, as sure as the Lord made little green apples, and that band's gonna be in uniform.
And another thing that is really absurd and I love is Harold Hill himself. He's a fun character to follow. The many ways he's conning people are really cartoonish, dishonest, and predatory, but never quite malicious.
That spread of the little finger, it's hereditary. Why, it means that your son's little finger is perfectly situated to operate the spit valve on a B-flat flugelhorn.
How can I get one of those horns?
Sign here, Mr. Mayor. That'll be $17 import fee.
Just think, I could have missed this whole thing. My son could have... I haven't got any son!
He follows the ideology of what people are paying for isn't his false product, but the anticipation. They pay him for him to make them feel good, but just don't know it. Which is a really interesting motivation for a character with which the movie never fully agrees with, but embraces nonetheless. In fact, he reminds me a bit of a more grounded version of Jim Carrey in The Mask. You know, that sort of quintessentially mid-century idea of a wolf character.
Oh, what can I do, my dear, to catch your ear? I love you madly, madly, Madam Librarian. Marion, heaven help us if the library caught on fire.
But the movie finds ways of not making that stale, or nothing more than a joke. He's constantly evading detection here, dodging compromising situations there. What the movie does with him is great. I especially like how they gave him a bit of a history. I mean, look at how he repurposes these posters that he presumably had in his suitcase from a previous con. Headache medicine headbands, that is so 19th century. But as with all romances, they're only as good as both partners. And this is where I have a bit of a problem. Marion Peru really wins you over in the first half. She's independent with a lot of heart, but constantly has to work within the situation that she's been given, having to deal with a thankless job and a chaotic family life, the pressure to get a man, and now this sleazy Casanova who follows the mindset of no means try even harder and please invade my family life.
Do you always burst into people's homes, prying into personal affairs? We're not interested.
Marion!
Well, there's one for and one against. Now why not let the boy's father decide?
The boy's father is dead.
One subplot worth mentioning is that of Winthrop, Marion's little brother, who was initially supposed to be the centerpiece of the story during its first few drafts, when the story was titled The Silver Triangle, which all revolved around him being mute and or paraplegic, and Hill convincing him to play a triangle as a means of self-expression, which they apparently couldn't make work despite their best efforts. So Winthrop Peru just ended up being a quiet and self-conscious kid with a lisp.
No thank you, who, Winthrop?
No thank you, Amarilla.
Amarilla!
While no longer the story's centerpiece, it uses him as an opportunity for Hill to learn humility, to great effect. And in my opinion, that bit is much more pleasant and natural for the story to do than to have Marion cave to her surroundings and imply to become a trad wife. But I guess that's the flip side of the Music Man being so quintessentially mid-20th century. Nowadays I could definitely see a version of the story where the screen time and amount of influence these two characters have on the plot was reversed and the romance was taken out. Now would that have made the movie better though? Honestly, no. Shirley Jones of Oklahoma, ! Fame, is doing way too much of a bang-up job here. In fact, this scene where Marion gives Hill the evidence she had collected against him as a gesture of good faith, and him returning that favor, does at least present a high point for both of their characters.
But you knew all the time.
I've known since 3 days after you came here. I meant to use it against you, but now I give it to you with all my heart.
Yeah, but if you knew...
In the last 15 minutes, Hill gets declared a fraud by another salesman who just came to town, The people chase him, capture him, force him to direct the band.
Think.
Which sounds bad, because of course it does. But is still loved by the parents, who love seeing their kids do stuff.
Barney, that you must buy, Barney!
Wonderful, Barney. If there's a person in this hall who doesn't want this man Hill tarred and feathered, let him, by God, stand up.
And you really get a sense that everyone in town has benefited from Hill's presence in some way. So Hill goes free, and get ready for the most 60s thing ever, where musical magic envelops the entire town, and the movie ends with a reprise of 76 trombones. The leading theme for Harold Hill's transformation, going from being presented as a symbol of his empty promises to a symbol of the joy he's brought to the town in reality. Man, what can I say? The Music Man is tinged in this righteous air of pure appreciation of the American idea, and appropriately for a movie about a conman, it really does manage to sell itself. Its nostalgic setting and fun attitude really allows it to become somewhat nostalgic in itself. It's essentially a fairy tale. It's the commercialized American Pied Piper, and just like the Pied Piper himself, it's enchanting. Its standout numbers, the Wells Fargo Wagon, You Got Trouble, 76 Trombones, Marion the Librarian, and of course, Shapoopy.
Shapoopy, Shapoopy, Shapoopy.
Are some of my favorite songs across all of musical theater. And the rest are simple and folksy enough to not only add to the flair, but add to the accessibility of the material. All over, the Music Man is just this really solid package that's both fun and popular in that typically American way. Wilson himself called the Music Man an Iowan's attempt to pay tribute to his home state, and that sums it up really well. It's silly, it's comfy, it's happy, it's all that was good about upbeat 1960s musicals, and you should probably give it a watch if that at all sounds like it would strike your fancy. By the way, bad news bears, the FNAF Let's Play is dead. Yeah, I decided it's just not worth it. I did an experiment where I made myself unkillable so I could fully complete the tasks, and all I got from that was 3 hours of footage where all I came across is broken minigames. Add sauce. Terribly designed environments, and I'm just not interested enough in seeing how girl gets turned into a furry to deal with that. Sorry, people. This is awful. Fuck this.
Let's go! Music Man!